In this section, we'll look at some of the fashion and style trends of the 1980s and some of the entertainment and a couple of the odds and ends in regard to the culture of the 80s. Looking first at female fashion styles, you see a lot of tight leggings popular. You can see this on the bottom left. And often they would wear sort of leg legs knee high like socks pulled up. These tight leggings pull up knee socks over them. Blouses were often designed with one shoulder open off, and shoulder pads are real popular. You can see it in a model here by Princess Diana there on the left in the red. But shoulder pads for women. A lot of women wore high-waisted pants and high-waisted jumpsuits were popular. You can see it on the right here. Many younger women adopted a more adventurous style, best exhibited by the singers Madonna, who's shown on the left, and Cyndi Lauper on the right. And this style included teased and dyed hair, really excessive ornamentation with things like bracelets and hooped earrings and a lot of necklaces, and they had odd and mismatching combinations and really obvious and heavy makeup. It was sort of a radical, considered a radical style that appealed to many younger women. More commonly, women wore a lot of acid wash denim, both jeans and jackets, and at the same time, you see leather bomber jackets and Ray-Ban aviator glasses were popular among both genders. You can see this from this bottom right clip with the popular movie Top Gun with Tom Cruise there in the bottom right. Given the broader social trends, men's business suits were largely conservative. And many of the young people, the yuppies certainly, a sort of a preppy style became popular. And you had a lot of bright colors, and polo shirts were popular. They'd wear khakis and boat shoes, docksider type shoes. They often wore sweaters tied around their shoulders, and they had bright, always buttoned down shirts, no more of the wide lapels. You can see this preppy look in all these pictures here. Many men preferred t-shirts worn with designer jackets, and they'd often have the sleeves worn up. You can see this style sort of modeled by the actor Don Johnson in the popular TV show Miami Vice, shown on the left here. That's why he's got a gun in there. Not everybody carried a gun like that, but you can see the style there. Members only jackets, that was a brand name, were real popular with men in the 1970s. Hip hop style began to grow from the African American community and soon became popular with young people from all races. You can see this, I might note, in the evolution of basketball style. In the 70s, you had these short pants up in the top right were popular, tight short pants, like I said. But when you get into the 90s and beyond, if today, you have a lot of longer, looser basketball pants, and that sort of came from the emerging hip-hop culture. Athletic shoes remained popular, and Nike company had a huge success in 1985 when it released its Air Jordan basketball shoes, high-priced basketball shoes. It was named for the famous University of North Carolina and Chicago Bulls star Michael Jordan, shown here on the bottom right. In music, you still have a lot of different genres and trends going on. There's a lot of innovative jazz music in the 1980s, for example. But in popular music, it was the heyday of the big hair heavy metal bands like Motley Crue on the right or Whitesnake on the left with the hair all sort of puffed up. Many successful 1980 bands filled massive arenas. Again, there's a lot of money in music. You can see some of the popular bands in the 80s from the top right going clockwise. The Kiss with all the makeup, and Queen with Freddie Mercury, the lead singer who later died of AIDS. And also you have Van Halen on the bottom left here. The 1980s were when rocker Bruce Springsteen sort of exploded in popularity. He had some hits in the 70s, but his album Born in the USA was a really big hit in the mid 80s, and he's now sort of an iconic rocker. Still, if I have to name the two of the biggest stars in music in the 80s, you got to go with Michael Jackson, shown on the left here. He had a tremendously large hit with the albums Thriller and Bad, and was known often as the King of Pop. And Madonna, on the right here, she had huge hits with like a Virgin and Material Girl, and sometimes she was referred to as the Queen of Pop. With the growth of cable TV, I mentioned in an earlier video, you see the launch of music television, or as it's known, MTV, and they would show short music videos of the songs, and this was something that obviously Michael Jackson, his Thriller video, was seen by millions, but Madonna took advantage of this too. But by the late 80s, MTV was moving away from these video clips into other programming like it does today. Now, I said in an earlier video, you have personal music devices like the cassette playing Walkman, but the 80s were the heyday of boom boxes, and that was kind of reflected the emerging hip-hop culture. People would carry these boom boxes and hang them on their shoulder and blast out tunes. With the growth of the video cassette recorder, the VCR, again, I mentioned that earlier in a previous video, you have the emergence of video rental stores everywhere. In 1985 in Dallas, the chain video store Blockbuster was launched and soon came to dominate the market. So you go in, you browse like you would at a library for a book, you'd get a video, and you'd be a member, and you'd show them your member card, and you'd rent the movie and have to return it by a given date. Sitcoms remained, the staple of television, and in some ways you could even say this, the 80s are the heyday of the sitcoms. You have iconic shows like Cheers, shown on the left, and that later launched the spinoff Frasier. And you've got Family Ties, shown in the middle, which was the launching pad for the career of actor Michael J. Fox. And you also have famously The Cosby Show with comedian Bill Cosby, recently in trouble for sexual predatory behavior. But anyway, in the 80s, his Cosby Show was unique because it depicted an upper class black family, and nobody had done that on television until that point. Crime dramas remained popular, our crime dramas. In the 80s, you had shows like Hill Street Blues and LA Law, and as I mentioned before, Miami Vice. One of the most successful shows was the drama series Dallas. You can see this on the right. And the big question of who shot one of the central characters, JR, was a tightly held secret revealed in one of the later episodes. Video arcade games were popular in the early 80s. In 1980, there was the famously released Pac-Man, but you have a number of other video games, and you had these businesses that grow up, and they had the video machines there, and you'd get coins or tokens and play the machines. But by the late 80s, the computer industry had grown up. That began to see, the personal game market growing with for example, the growth of Nintendo and Mario Brothers and so forth. But soon, home gaming largely ended the video arcades. Among fads in the 1980s, you had things like the Cabin Patch Kids, the little dolls. You had the Rubik's Cube, which had first been invented in the 1970s, but was real popular. And popular board games were like Risk, or one of the more famous ones was Trivial Pursuit, where you have to answer questions of knowledge, and you get cards asking you questions. Maybe you remember that one. When it came to things like technology, you see cell phones, which had first been introduced in the 1970s. They were becoming increasingly popular during the 1980s, but they still remained kind of large and bulky, and so you didn't see them as widely used as you would later on. Also, you see the first disposable contact lens marketed in the 1980s. I could go on and on with technological and medical advances. You get things like the beginning of gene therapies in the 1980s. You see the first disposable cameras shown on the left here in 1986. The invention of the Doppler radar in 1988, and high definition TV. Interestingly, when it comes to medicine, you see the invention of Prozac, which was a new class of drugs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or the SSRIs. And the most famous of that was Prozac, which revolutionized the treatment of mental illness, and that was introduced in 1988. In any event, this concludes this section on some of the cultural trends of the 1980s.